The following views are not necessarily endorsed by this radio station.
We're speaking with Michelle Pearce, CEO of the Australian Christian Lobby. Firstly, Michelle, what is the Australian Christian Lobby?
It's a political lobby group. We lobby politicians on issues that Christians are concerned about across the nation. We have influence on public policy, and also we educate Christians around the nation as to what the key issues are and enable them to campaign alongside us.
Now, you've created a website, australiavotes.org.au. How should people use it?
australiavotes.org.au is a website where we have compared all of the policies of the major parties on issues of concern to Christians, and also allowed candidates to respond to a question that we've put to them so Christians can compare the positions of the parties and also see the values of their candidates.
How have you chosen the policy questions addressed on the website?
There are a broad range of issues that Christians are concerned about. We couldn't ask parties 100 questions, so we had to condense it to those that we really believe are pertinent to our nation at this very moment. So I think that Christians who come from many different perspectives will be able to appreciate the answers that are given on the website.
And finally, Michelle, what would be your encouragement to Christians as the election draws closer?
Go onto the website australiavotes.org.au and be informed. If all Christians are well informed and if we all vote according to truth, then we can have a significant impact on the outcome of the election.
Authorised by M. Pearce for the Australian Christian Lobby Canberra, station sponsor.
Dr. Beryl D'Souza has done it all when it comes to caring for those less fortunate. From the Dignity Freedom Network and throughout Southeast Asia especially, women and children get cast aside quite often, and so she is there along with her team to help them. She hears the stories. She's giving dignity back to so many who otherwise have been told you are worth less, but actually they are worth more than they can possibly imagine. If you love this podcast and these conversations, would you like, rate, review this wherever you find it, wherever you might be listening? It helps us get the word out just that bit more. Let's get stuck into this conversation with Dr. Beryl D'Souza. Beryl, thanks so much for joining us.
Thanks, Clayton. It's so lovely to speak to all of our listeners today.
It's wonderful to have you with us. Let's talk a little bit about what these organisations are, and then we're going to dig into some of those stories as well. Let's start off with the Good Shepherd Healthcare, all of these various aspects. Could you explain what they are and what your role is with them?
Yes. Well, Good Shepherd is a charity that works for areas of social justice, particularly among providing education for vulnerable communities, primary health care, and anti-trafficking and protection of exploitation of women and girls. It's been doing that for over 15 years now, and has a span of about close to 100 schools with about 20,000 plus children in the schools, and about 75 primary health centers, virtual health centers, and alongside a robust anti-trafficking program among women and girls affected by various forms of sexual exploitation.
And the reason that for you this is such a passion project, I mean, obviously for each of us as we hear about trafficking or we hear about exploitation, none of us think that's okay. But not everybody is sort of then dedicating whole, parts of their life and pretty much their whole life to making sure these things change. So what was the reason for you to say, look, I want to make sure I'm setting these up and getting involved in these sorts of things?
Well, a couple of incidents happened in my life where I was faced with the reality of the life of a woman affected by this problem. Initially, when I was a young doctor, I got to work in a little hospital where women were about the same age that I were and were affected with sexually transmitted illnesses and HIV and AIDS. And at that time, there was very little access to medicines to help them. And the hospital and the team that I worked with, we tried our best to get them the health care, but not much was available for them, and we basically helped them die with dignity. And it's quite impactful if you get to help a few hundred women die when you think you've become a doctor to help cure illness. So it was like a wake-up call for me. And then as I worked in another hospital, I was faced with a young girl who was only 15 years old and was a victim of commercial sexual exploitation in the home that she was staying in. When I was working with rescuing her and with the local police, I was sort of challenged by the police officer that it was a hopeless attempt to rescue girls and women from sexual exploitation because it was self-sustaining, as he put it. He said, "Don't you know, 85% of girls will go back, so there's no point in you wasting your efforts here." And since I was, in particular involved with the care of this 15-year-old girl, it seemed all wrong, And then I said, and he was telling that to me as to, let me know that these were bad girls, these were bad women, and that it was a pointless case. And to me, it was like, this is a child, and if that is the truth, then the whole system is flawed, and this requires then a systemic effort to stop and prevent this from continuing. So that was how myself and the team made a decision that this has to stop, and we would then dedicate our time and efforts towards that.
There's two things I want to really grab out of the comments you've made there. One is that this sort of idea, and perhaps it's something we don't understand as much in Australia, but this concept that perhaps fellow relatives or those close to somebody might actually allow a relative or a family member to be either sold into some sort of slavery or used in some way, shape or form. Is it incredibly prevalent? Is it just that there's enough that therefore it's something that is we need to look at? Could you talk into that a little bit? I think most of us here in Australia don't quite understand the different aspects of that and how, not necessarily culturally is the wrong word to that, but that it's more accepted than it would be perhaps here in Australia.
Absolutely, yes. So very often it is a family member who helps initiate the girl into any form of sexual exploitation. And so years back when I began my work, it would be like, what kind of family member can do this? How fallen or how sick could a parent be? But as I got to work with these communities over the last decade or so, I've got to realize, number one, there's been such abject poverty, such abject situations that there is really no other option, which basically makes us the part of the problem that we've allowed, the situation to get so despairing that the only option is then to, what happens when you have 4 children and your wife is sick? More than 85% of Indians will pay out of pocket for a healthcare expense. And so if you have money, you can afford to, pay for that health expenditure. But if you do not have money, then you start selling your assets. If you have assets, if you have land, you sell your land. If you have cows or, you have cattle, you sell it. But if you don't have that, then, society says, oh, you have a 15-year-old daughter, why don't you, send her to this place and you will get money. And they may not even imply that she would be exploited that way. They'll be like, she'll get a good job and she'll support the family and, take over that expense. And so it's sort of condoned by society that this is a good option. And of course, the parent knows that there is a risk of harm involved, but then there is no other option. And so once you've done that and society then says this is a good thing, it becomes sort of commonplace to then, okay, fine, this is how life is because there are no other options. And this is how I support my family. And after some time, when you're repeatedly involved in, a practice that is clearly instinctively wrong, it sort of becomes normalized. And I would not like to use the word culture because I think it happens all around the world where we start normalizing something that is clearly instinctively wrong. And it becomes a practice where, your daughters are now sex slaves, and that's okay because that's the normal here.
Thank you. That's a great correction on that to normalising. I think that's a much better phrase than what I was trying to attempt to describe. Thank you so much for explaining that to us, Beryl, too. The other part of your first comment I wanted to grab a hold of was the fact that you said, well, me and the team around us, we decided this is something we're going to do something about. And here you are, you had, policemen saying, look, 85% of girls are going to go back to this anyway. It's no point. You're saying that there's this aspect of normalization, and yet here you are saying hold on, we've got to do something. It must have felt like a big mountain to be trying to climb and push back so much of it. How did you even start that, and how have you continued, I suppose? Because I'm imagining there's a fair bit of opposition to it happening and you trying to change this.
Yes. Well, I was able to, we were able to find, first of all, strength in the power of one. So, the one person that you help, despite the extreme challenges you have, and to see transformation in that one person is very, very inspiring. And when that one person then goes on to help another person, that again, shows the sustainability and the long-term impact of your work. So, now that we've come along the journey, we see that so many of our victims have now become partners with us. One unique aspect of our program is that it's very grassroots level, and that the leaders of the program are themselves victims who have now turned into leaders. So they're no longer in the victim mode. They've moved past the survivor mode to where they're thrivers, and they're like these amazing group of powerful women who want to see evil stop, who want to claim justice for themselves and their families, their women, their communities. And that's been really inspiring, and I think the perfect, treasure that we have been able to see all these years. We've had so many people come alongside us of various faiths and denominations who have stood with us. We have strong partnerships with, local police and legal workers. And again, that's been very encouraging. So essentially to say that, there's a lot of good out there, and people instinctively, we have a desire to not have evil be perpetuated or to stop something that's unjust. And I think that's something that can resonate across faiths as well, that, this is wrong and that this shouldn't be accepted.
We're going to come back in a couple of minutes' time, and I want to talk specifically about how the program works, and we want to hear some of the stories, and we may not be able to use people's names specifically, but we'd love to hear you describing some of it. But before we do get to that, could you take us through this sort of idea of, and again, it's something that is a little more foreign to us here in Australia, but often those who you are working with are the lowest caste within Indian society, which is still quite a strong way of looking and viewing at the world. Could you talk to us about how that group of people so often are just not cared for in any way in Indian society?
Yes, that's a very good question, Clayton. So according to ancient Indian times, the Indian society was divided into different castes, similar to classes and sections of society, except that the one difference being that you were born into a caste. It comes out of myth or mythology that God created man differently, and so God created man from different parts of his body, and those that were from his upper parts of his body, so the head and the trunk, the shoulders, were known as the forward castes. And those that were formed from his feet were known as the lower caste. And then there's this huge group of people known as the outcasts or the Dalits or the untouchables, who are not created in God's image, and even today form predominantly India's working class, India's, the great migrant labor class, the great, when you talk about poverty in India, when you talk about various forms of forced labor or trafficking, these are the ones who are being victimized by it. So it cannot purely be coincidental then that, that caste is a strong determinant of whether a person has a right to education, to shelter, to a safe and sound life. And so even though officially there have been huge steps by the government in affirming those from the lower caste and the outcast communities, we're still way behind, the UN Millennium Goals of sustainable development, where women are protected from violence, or there is right to education for everyone. And so the caste system continues to be seen in the most discreet and, not obscure ways, where unless you go looking for it, you may think, oh, this is just poverty, or this is not a big problem. So primarily with the women that I work with, women who are exploited by religious exploitation of sex, if you look and the studies have been done, that 99% of them belong to the scheduled caste or the Dalits, which again is another portrayal of the fact that surely there is a caste-based discrimination that makes a woman vulnerable to sexual exploitation. Yeah. And these are again main givers that caste-based exploitation, oppression, injustices is prevalent in India today, and that more concerted efforts need to be taken at various state, national and international level to ensure that we have a more just society.
Dr. Beryl D'Souza is my guest from the Dignity Freedom Network, helping especially women and girls who've been cast aside throughout Southeast Asia get that dignity back. We're going to be back with Beryl in just a couple of minutes' time.
The following views are not necessarily endorsed by this radio station.
This federal election, make an informed choice by knowing where political parties and candidates stand on the issues that shape our nation when you go to australiavotes.org.au. It cuts through political spin with a clear Christian values-based comparison of party policies and responses on issues affecting you and your community. Make your vote count by being informed and prepared at australiavotes.org.au. Thanks to the Australian Christian Lobby.
Authorised by M. Pearce for the Australian Christian Lobby Canberra. Program sponsor.
Dr. Beryl, before we even sort of go into the aspects around what the actual program does, which I'm very, very keen to hear how you do that. Firstly, I know that you have a Christian faith. How does that actually inspire the work that you are doing as you head and care for so many people?
I think that faith to me particularly is very important in how I view the world around me, how I view myself, and how I react to the world. Teachings from our scriptures have, helped me in developing my own sense of worth. And I think particularly when I work with women who've been exploited and have lived lives of amazing trauma, understanding worth can be a huge challenge to them because, your families, your communities have taught you that there's no worth. And so having a faith-based approach helps us value each other in a way that, that celebrates incredibly this gift of life and, each one's individuality and uniqueness and the belief that we're all basically created in the image of God and that nothing can change that no matter where we've been or what's happened to us or what level of education or economic or caste status we have. Having said that, the work that we do in the communities are with, women from various faiths or of no faith, particularly with the form of religious exploitation on the basis of for sex. The women are actually very wary of God and religion, and so religion is not at all a player in the work we do. It's more about value and faith, which is, of course, as I said, because of our faith, but it's not a part of our agenda to see, religious changes happen in the people that we work in. Yeah. Does that answer your question?
Absolutely. Yeah. Thank you so much. It's fantastic to see the passion of what it is that is what you are a part of and your belief system and how then that impacts others as you go through whatever they may or not believe. You just treat them with such value and worth and dignity. Can you take us through actually what does occur? So you might find a girl who has been found themselves in this situation in some way, shape or form. What actually happens as you get involved and through the Dignity Freedom Network actually occurs for this girl?
Right. So as I mentioned earlier in the program, that it's a grassroots level program in rural Telangana where particularly we have adopted a few hundred villages, about 300 villages, where women who were once victims themselves have been rescued, empowered, educated, and have now turned into leaders in their community. They're like vigilantes, which makes me very excited because it's amazing what these women do. And their main job is then to look out for other young women, vulnerable girls who are at risk of being put into the same situation that they were, and then tie up with local community forces. There's a strong team of paralegal workers, social workers, health workers, teachers who then go in and stop, the process of another girl being sold into any form of sexual exploitation. And often it can be at their own personal safety and risk. So we have stories where women have been beaten up, or women have been abused or threatened or sent to the police station at 3 a.m. in the morning with no other female police officer being there. And yet these women are these strong models of safety and prevention, because they just don't want to see any young girl again get into the same situation that they were at. And so prevention is a huge, huge aspect of the work that we do at a grassroots level. Every week, there are hundreds and hundreds of community meetings that happen all across rural Telangana, where the law is talked about. In India, we have a lot of laws that ban most of the evil injustices, but then at the grassroots level, the understanding of the law, what it means, like what are the consequences to the law, what are the repentances available, that's not known to common people. And so a lot of education and awareness is done on a weekly level, so to prevent the system, and then to look at ways of protecting women and young girls out of, economically desperate situations. So it's either primary healthcare resources, or it's having a girl child in school, or it is, looking at sustainable livelihood opportunities. And again, we partner with grassroots level organizations, we partner with the government in looking at all of these opportunities for these young women and girls. So I think we have about 800 girls over the last couple of years who've been put into school through the local government systems, where they're in safe places, because very often having a girl child at home when her parents are both out working as manual laborers puts her at risk of various forms of sexual exploitation, because there is no one to look after for her. So that's something that maybe sounds foreign in your concept, the importance of having a girl at home and having her at school, and how that puts her at risk. Alongside with the awareness programs, then comes the actual rescue, where, as I mentioned, the vigilantes tie in with the local team, and the girl is then taken out of a horrible situation and then placed along with the local government support, either in a government home or in a home provided by Good Shepherd. If she's already been a victim of exploitation, then she goes through a whole trauma recovery model, where she works with psychologists, social workers, psychiatrists if required, in helping her recover from her trauma, and then basically placed in a safe home where she has access to good education, healthcare, again, ongoing mental health support, and vocational skills. Over the years, we have seen girls graduate through our shelters, and it's very exciting now that we've almost had close to about 10 graduate, that we have a few of these girls finishing graduation and coming back and working with us. To me, that's one great, reward of our work, is to see that women and girls who've been through the entire process say, this is good work and we want to be part of it. Just a few days back, I had the opportunity of talking to one of my older teenage girls in one of the shelters that we work in, who was having boyfriend problems. And as a mother of 3 children, 3 boys, it's really nice to have a teenage girl talk to me about boy issues. But, she was having all these struggles. At the same time, she was like, I'm doing well in my studies, and my plan is when I finish, I want to come and work with you all, and I want to see other women and girls being helped. So that's very encouraging. So we have currently about 1 girl working with us, and about 2 young girls who are finishing nursing school who want to have committed to working in our programs to, again, support and help women like themselves out of the system of slavery.
It's wonderful to hear, and I'm guessing that over the years you've had plenty of stories where you're able to celebrate with them and as they have had a life changed. We talked way back at the start. I think you were quoting effectively a police officer that said, look, 85% of these girls, if they're ever rescued or whatever, they're just going to go back to the same thing. My sense is perhaps as they come into contact with yourself and the team at the Dignity Freedom Network, that there's probably not that percentage. Do you have stats like that says, well, actually, if they engage with what we do, this many don't go back now? Do you have those sorts of understandings?
Yes, we're actually currently working on a study, so we don't have official stats, but our estimates are that our recidivism rate is very, very low. So it's probably less than 5%. And the reason is not because we're the greatest organization ever, but it's because it's a very grassroots level program where we're working painstakingly within the community itself. So it's not just you rescue a girl, you take them out, you put them through a rehab program and then you leave them. It's basically we're working within the community itself, changing the drivers for the forms of, for the root cause of exploitation. And so it's a more long-lasting work, but it's also much more time-consuming and less glamorous. And our commitment to our women is not just for a short period of time. It's not just for, the 3 months or the 6 months or the 1 year. It's like for the rest of their life. For any one person with trauma, I was talking to a woman recently from Australia who was talking about trauma in her family of, her sister who had violence and intimate partner violence in the West. And 30 years later, she was still having effects of trauma that, express themselves in different ways. So if you're working with young women and girls who've been traumatized at a very early age, very often with the support of their family, then that trauma is, bound to be there for a very long time. So you can't just solve it in a few months or a few years. There has to be an ongoing community support. And I do believe that our organization is able to provide that because it is a community program, it is a grassroots level program, and it is a long-term program. So these women have opportunities of support at various ages and stages of their life.
It's just wonderful. I mean, that's just remarkable to hear and so stunning, the results of what it is, but also that long-term commitment, that idea of staying with somebody, not just for this moment and, well, they come in this program at this time, but for their life. It is truly honouring and remarkable to you and the work that you do. Beryl. Just as we finish up, for people who want to find out more or get involved, now one of the ways obviously is they can come and hear you speak a bit more this coming Thursday in Ringwood, and you can find out more details there and get your ticket to this dinner at dfn.org.au. That's the Dignity Freedom Network, dfn.org.au. If someone can't get to that though, what's the best way for them to find out a bit more about the work and perhaps support the work of what you're doing?
Well, I can give you a number that they can call into, which is 1-800-949-774.
Wonderful. 1-800-949-774 is a place you can ring and ask some questions, perhaps, if you like, as well. That website also, dfn.org.au.
Or they can email info@dfn.org.au.
Oh, there you go. Well, how about that? We're getting all of it. info@dfn.org.au. That is wonderful. I'm so passionate about this, and I think we've had on this program a number of conversations around the sort of work that you are doing in India, and it is always so inspiring to be hopefully helping in whatever way. Maybe somebody's listening and they can say, well, I can go over and help the work physically, or maybe say, well, I can't do that, but I can give, or I can support in some way, shape or form. This is the opportunities, I think, is you are heading up that team. And so we just want to say thank you for the work that you are doing, Beryl. Thank you for your time that you've shared with us today as well.
Well, thank you for having me, Clayton.
The following views are not necessarily endorsed by this radio station.
We're speaking with Michelle Pearce, CEO of the Australian Christian Lobby. Firstly, Michelle, what is the Australian Christian Lobby?
It's a political lobby group. We lobby politicians on issues that Christians are concerned about across the nation. We have influence on public policy, and also we educate Christians around the nation as to what the key issues are and enable them to campaign alongside us.
Now, you've created a website, australiavotes.org.au. How should people use it?
AustraliaVotes.org.au is a website where we have compared all of the policies of the major parties on issues of concern to Christians, and also allowed candidates to respond to a question that we've put to them so Christians can compare the positions of the parties and also see the values of their candidates.
How have you chosen the policy questions addressed on the website?
There are a broad range of issues that Christians are concerned about. We couldn't ask parties 100 questions, so we had to condense it to those that we really believe are pertinent to our nation at this very moment. So I think that Christians who come from many different perspectives will be able to appreciate the answers that are given on the website.
And finally, Michelle, what would be your encouragement to Christians as the election draws closer?
Go onto the website australiavotes.org.au and be informed. If all Christians are well informed and if we all vote according to truth, then we can have a significant impact on the outcome of the election.
Authorised by M. Pearce for the Australian Christian Lobby Canberra, station sponsor.